Gobekli Tepe and the Watchers of Eden, and this is something which is a personal journey for me as well, because it's something that really began when I was a child, because I had a strange fascination with angels, and it really began when I was at Sunday school, and I was really interested in all the different stories that were being told to me by this rather stern-faced teacher, female teacher. And I loved the idea of Moses parting, or God parting the Red Sea for Moses, and I loved the idea of Jesus feeding the 5,000 with just some loaves and fishes. I loved miracles basically, but the Sunday schools just went on and on and on, and all I could do was just, imagine myself down the park playing football with my father and my brother, and eventually I gave them up. But I remember one particular day, the teacher started talking about angels, and she referred to the story of Abraham. Obviously he was the father of the Hebrew race. And she said that on one occasion 3 angels turned up, by his tent, by his camp, and they sat down with him, and not only did they talk to him, on a one-to-one basis, but they even sat down and ate regular food with him. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I know about angels that with radiant bodies and beautiful wings, but there's something different here. You're suggesting that angels have some kind of corporeal existence, or whatever my brain thought at that particular age, which was probably about 9 or something. And this idea of communicating and being mates with angels really appealed to me, and it actually stuck in my head right the way through till the time that I did this book, From the Ashes of Angels, that has already been mentioned here tonight. And it was one of the reasons why I eventually ended up going to a place called Haran. And Haran is a city in what is today southeast Turkey, and it was a Bronze Age centre, a crossroads of many different places interconnected across the Near East and the Middle East. And it has a history that goes back at least 8,000 years. Different studies and archaeological fieldwork and the rest of it has established this fact. And it's a very interesting place, as you'll see, because firstly it was a place that the Mesopotamian civilizations, the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Assyrians and the Babylonians frequented. And in fact there was actually a temple to the moon god Sin, and also to his consort, who I haven't got her name and it's not actually directly recorded. There was a big temple to him and another to her, and this was one of the main reasons that this place was put on the map. And in addition to this, it's a fact that Haran is the home of Hermetica. Now, Hermetica is obviously the teachings of Greco-Roman Egypt, which were themselves derived from pharaonic or dynastic Egypt, the wisdom, the philosophy, the knowledge, the ideas, the ways of life. And although obviously these were collated together initially in Egypt, around the time of the Arab conquest, they moved from Egypt and settled actually at Haran, where they were created into a corpus of literature that eventually was the spiritual backbone of the whole Renaissance, which obviously in many ways began in Italy in around sort of something like 1450 or whatever. And the centre point, the collection point of this Hermetic literature was Haran. Obviously Hermetica means the thrice great Hermes, who obviously you can see in this slide here. But in addition to this, and this is probably a little bit more speculative, but it's certainly worth throwing in to the audience here tonight, and that is that some very serious research has suggested that the origins of the tarot deck actually go back to Haran. And obviously this deck, which obviously has been referred to as the Book of Thoth, Thoth being an Egyptian god that may have been transported with the Hermetic literature, that this may have been the place where these playing cards actually had their foundation. And once again, it's been suggested that certain cards may have actually been based upon imagery seen actually at Haran. One of which, and the most obvious being, the tower, which obviously is shown with fire or being destroyed or something like this. And it's a fact that at Haran there is a tower that almost mimics the idea of this tarot card. And it's actually referred to as the astronomical tower. Now, the reason why it's called astronomical tower is that it was believed that the inhabitants of Haran were astronomers, and we'll come on to who they are in a second, and that they used this tower, which in fact is the minaret of the Great Mosque or Paradise Mosque, which was constructed around the 7th to 8th century AD for the observation of the stars and to make the calculations that they needed. And even today, if you go there, I mean, I was quite astonished when I first went there in 2004, and these kids came up and greeted me, and they started saying, "Oh look, we'll be your guides," and started pulling you off doors. It said, "Come and see the astronomical tower." I said, "What?" And this is what they actually showed me. So this, I think, is quite intriguing. So who were the inhabitants of Haran? Well, collectively they are referred to by scholars as the Haranites or the Haranians. However, history refers to them under other names. They are known as the Sabians, which basically means star worshippers, and this was one of the names that was applied to them, or they applied themselves shortly after the time of the Arab conquest. It's a term that's also used by some of their descendants, people who still exist today, mostly within the area of the Tigris river of Lower Iraq, and who are known as the Mandaeans or the Suba. And they also refer to themselves as the Sabians. And there's a relationship between the two. Unquestionably, the Mandaeans owe at least something of their existence to the Sabians, their namesakes of Haran. But they were also known as the Chaldeans. You'll find this term in many ancient texts in literature by the Arab chroniclers, by the Hebrew chroniclers, and by the people of the Syrian church, the historians of that. And the Chaldeans, although often they are associated with Lower Iraq, actually were the peoples that inhabited the area of Upper Mesopotamia. This is the area that's essentially today southeast Turkey, northern Syria, and parts of northern Iraq. And the Chaldeans are known to have been astrologers, soothsayers, diviners. That's the way that they're remembered. But in all honesty, they're almost certainly synonymous with the Sabians of Haran. In other words, they were the pagans of Haran. And it's interesting enough here, this is an image of the moon card, the tarot, well, I say the tarot, sort of proto-tarot, that dates from 1454, that shows, these figures, these diviners, these astrologers, who I would like to think of in terms of the Sabians of Haran. However, the most important, as far as religious history, person to have been associated with Haran is Abraham, the father of the Hebrews, the father of the Jewish race, the father of the Israelites. And if you read the book of Genesis, you will see that it is said that he had family at Haran and that he dwelt there. That's what the King James Bible says, before he made his journey to Canaan, the promised land of God. And his father Terah was also there, and as I say, there were various other members of his immediate group, plus his ancestors were supposedly living in the area as well. And what's interesting is that according to Kurdish tradition, and this certainly goes back as far as medieval times, but almost certainly antedates that, is that Abraham was born in the nearby city of what is today known as Shunlurfa, although until recently it was known as Urfa or Orpha, and was the biblical city of Edessa. In fact, Edessa was the first city, and the king of Edessa was the first king to actually convert to Christianity in the 1st century AD. And today, if you go to what's known as the pools of Abraham, which are actually full of these huge great carp, thousands and thousands of them that are fed by the visitors to the place. Just off to the left of here is a cave that is visited by Kurdish Muslims to this day, and it's actually divided into two sections. There's the section for the females and the section for the males, and quite obviously, you know, you don't want to mess that up, obviously. And this is a very sacred shrine in Islamic tradition. People come from all over the region, you know, to pay their respects to Abraham, his birthplace. And it's said, according to the book of Genesis, that Abraham was born at Ur of the Chaldees. Now obviously Chaldees, we've already mentioned, Chaldees are a people, but since the 19th century, archaeologists and historians and prehistorians have wanted to place this city called Ur of the Chaldeans in southern Iraq. And in fact, Leonard Woolley, the famous British archaeologist, uncovered a city called Ur in this region, which immediately became associated with the city, the biblical city of this name. But in the Mesopotamian languages, Ur simply means city. And I am pretty certain that the original Ur of the Chaldeans was Shunlurfa itself. You know, and lots of things make sense. That Abraham lived in this area. This is where he was born. He moved to Haran before this journey down. I mean, the maps make sense of this and the rest of it. So just bear that in mind.
So what river was that?
Sorry?
What river was that?
That was not a river. That's pools that are fed by springs that you know still bubble up today. Now, according to Sabian tradition, which was then inherited and repeated by the Arab chroniclers, by Hebrew historians, and by members of the Christian church, it was said that when Abraham arrived at Haran, he tried to convert the locals into his monotheistic ideas. Now, some of them apparently converted and travelled with him to Canaan. However, the rest of them said, our religion is older than yours, and it goes back to Seth, the son of Adam, to Enoch, the antediluvian patriarch, and to Noah. And they said, on your bike, basically, which I find intriguing. I mean, the reality of these myths and legends are up to you, but the associations, I think, are important. You're dealing with a current of activity which has certainly been preserved since medieval times and almost certainly goes back to an earlier date. And I think that there's relevance in them. There's connections here which should not be ignored. Okay, so Abraham's associated with Haran, he's associated with Shonlerfa. However, this whole region is connected with different episodes of the book of Genesis. This is where the events of the book of Genesis were played out before Abraham's departure to Canaan. For instance, Noah is said to have landed in the ark with his family on a mountain to the northeast of Haran called Kudidar, which used to be called Mount Al-Juden. And you might be saying, well, hold on, I thought that it says in the Bible that, that Noah and his family landed on Mount Ararat. No. This is a late tradition that was almost certainly political in its motivation, and it was actually achieved by the Armenian church in around the 5th century. Before this time, and in other traditions, in Muslim tradition, all Kurdish religions, amongst the Syrian church, who were almost certainly one of the oldest forms of Christianity, the landing place of Noah's Ark was Kudidar, and Ararat was only became the landing place after the Armenian church seized this tradition and pulled it into Armenia themselves. And the reason for this is that they hated the Syrian church, and that Kudidar was in Syrian territory, and they wanted to steal this idea away. That's not to say that Mount Ararat was a very ancient and very sacred place. Absolutely it was. But the oldest traditions associated with the landing place of Noah's Ark are Kudidar, and that's to the northeast of Haran. Now, obviously, Noah, once he'd landed, his 3 sons, Ham, Japheth and Shem, went on, their own families supposedly populated the ancient world. Well, the most important one from our point of view is Shem, because it was said that after the ark came to rest on Kudidar, he himself left behind his father Noah at the foot of the mountain to create the first settlement, and he then travelled into the eastern Taurus mountains, where he established his own settlement with his own family. Okay, and that's not very far away from Haran at all. And it was said that this is the same locality where Seth, the son of Adam, also had his settlement after his father and mother Eve had been thrown out of the Garden of Eden, the earthly paradise. Which brings us on to the much earlier and the origin point of the human race, according to Hebrew tradition, the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Because despite various theories and ideas and traditions that place the Garden of Eden, the so-called earthly paradise, all over the world, from the North Pole to South America to equatorial Africa and to the Levant, if you look at the book of Genesis and read exactly what it says that the Garden of Eden is where the 4 rivers of paradise take their source. And since 2 of those are very easily identifiable as the Tigris and the Euphrates, it either means that they're at the mouth of the Tigris and Euphrates, where those 2 rivers meet the Persian Gulf, or they're at the other end, the source of those rivers in what is today eastern Turkey, within the eastern Taurus Mountains, or those just to the north of it, which are known as the Armenian Highlands. And the traditions in this area are certainly that this is where Adam and Eve were, this is where the Garden of Eden was. And in fact, in the book which is coming out next year, which I've written called Göbekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods, I will show that the tradition of the Garden of Eden being in this area was not just remembered in traditions within the eastern Taurus mountains, but that there was one particular monastery that actually believed that it was on the site of the Garden of Eden, and that they even had a piece of what they believed was the Tree of Life, and that they revered this in sacred ceremonies right the way through until the Armenian genocide of 1915, when the whole thing was destroyed. But I was out there, I've been to the ruins, they're still there and they're still magnificent, and this is a story which I'll bring to you in due course. And this is really important because this is not far away from where I will be showing that the genesis of our current civilization began in the so-called Neolithic Revolution. The image that you see here is a mural within a church in Florence, in Italy, and it actually shows the dying Adam here, slightly covered, and Eve here, now obviously covered because they no longer, have the same innocence. So this is after they've been thrown out of the Garden of Eden, the earthly paradise, and the elderly gentleman here is actually Adam's son Seth, and this is the story